in lots of different communities.
Welcome to today's episode. It's a special one for me personally because there's a special friend that I look up to is here. So a couple of years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Wendy Stearman at a private gathering at a church. And she was introduced to me by a mutual friend. And since then, our paths have crossed numerous times within the grassroots movement, where I've mostly played a supporting role in the initiatives, and she passionately drives forward. So Wendy, her husband, their son John, and some of their other children have not only come as collaborators, but also in these endeavors, but they also became dear friends. Last year, my wife and kids and I, we were able to go and celebrate July 4th at their home, and it was one of the greatest experiences. So it was a memorable event and highlighted their hospitality and very deep commitment to their faith, this great nation, and conservative values in general. Today, Wendy joins us to discuss her campaign for the Oklahoma Senate, aiming to unseat the incumbent in District 29. As we explore her vision and legislative priorities, it's not just her political insight, that I look forward to sharing with you, but also the integrity and dedication that she and her family bring to everything they do. Let's dive into this conversation that is sure to be enlightening, but more importantly, it is going to be very encouraging for all of us. Listen in. I want to welcome you to Defender's Voice podcast. We've been doing this for this is the 10th one, I believe, that we're recording. Mm-hmm. So, Wendy Stearman, thank you for coming. I know that you don't do this often. So tell me a little more about that one.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. And, I am a private person, an introvert and a homeschool mom. So doing interviews is not something that I seek.
Yeah, understand. But that's really always boggle my mind when you say that you're an introvert, but you're in public space. You served as a congresswoman for Oklahoma, and now you're running for the Senate seat. Mm-hmm. How does that work? Introvert and public serving.
Well, I love liberty, and I love my family, and I love this country.
Yeah,
and that overpowers my tendencies toward being an introvert. So because it's necessary, because no one else would do it.
Right. So the what is that? The necessity is the mother of all inventions, and in this case,
I suppose so. Yeah.
So when did you start your love for not politics specifically, specifically, wanting to serve, etc., freedom and liberty, as you always correct me, don't use freedom, use liberty. So before we go back to
you can use freedom, but I love liberty.
Okay, tell us the difference.
Well, liberty is only possible through Jesus Christ.
Amen.
So when he came, the law was nailed to the cross permanently, and he extended to us the opportunity to be free in him. And so without him, there is no liberty, because liberty is not chaos. It's not anarchy, as some say. It's the ability to not be controlled, but you are controlled by the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the one living through you and allowing you, to glorify him. And so, in this country, we have liberty, but liberty is the ability to not be controlled by government.
Yeah.
And so I love the freedom that we have in Christ.
Yeah.
And that is the liberty that I seek. I teach government, to homeschool high school kids, and I've done that for many years. Yeah. And my favorite question to ask them the first week is, what is government? And, I get all the feedback. And do we need government? Well, yeah, because, if we don't have government, we're going to have anarchy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then do you need government? Does a law make you a good person? And they all finally reach the conclusion, well, no, because I have the Holy Spirit, and that leads me to do things in love. So the government is not there for me, for each individual. It is, in our case, the government is there to keep other governments out and to defend our rights. So
but that's not how it is working out right now.
Well, no. The ideal case is not what we're seeing, but that's what we strive for.
Right. But take us back to growing up years. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Norman.
Okay.
And
Norman, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I was the oldest in my family.
Okay.
And we, journeyed to Houston for a little while. My mother, both my parents' families were from there. We lived there for a while.
Okay.
While we were there, my brother was born, and then my mother actually had she stopped breathing one night. Oh. And there was an autopsy done. She did pass away eventually, but at that time there was an autopsy done. They don't really know why, but I was 8 years old. Well, I'm sorry, I was 5 years old when this happened. Oh. I was 8 when she finally passed away. But so we lived in Houston at the time. I was 5. My brother was 1. It was Mother's Day. She rolled over to turn off the alarm clock, and my father heard her breathing strangely, and she was unresponsive. So he carried her to the car and drove her to the hospital. And she had some significant brain damage after that. And he continued to care for her. So that is what brought us back to the Oklahoma, to the Tulsa area, actually.
Okay.
Her family lived in that area, and he came back hoping that her family would help. Okay. And so anyway, she lived 3 more years and passed away when I was 8. And then my father remarried, and more siblings came.
Okay.
So anyway.
Wow. So we never knew what actually happened.
There were several ideas, but no one knew for sure.
Okay. And you're the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
And are you close to your dad?
Well, he is no longer living, but yes, I was.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And when did the politics enter your mind? Well,
so my father was, he was a Marine. He was in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And that always was a big part of his life. It had a huge influence in who he was. And he was always aware of obviously what was going on at the national level, but appreciated freedom very much. And so I think from an early age, that was introduced to me. And also, he introduced me to Jesus as well when I was very young. And he grew up in a very legalistic, he was raised a Nazarene, and very much dependent on the law in their theology. His father was a Nazarene preacher, so that was something that was a big part of his life, and he did not actually hear the gospel of Jesus, the freedom that comes through a relationship with him, until after I was born.
Wow.
And that's when he finally accepted Christ. And so that played a big part in my direction toward loving freedom, loving this country, and the understanding of liberty.
Now, you homeschool now, but were you homeschooled?
I was the guinea pig.
Okay.
So
Testing grounds.
Yeah, I'm the only one who ever went to school.
Okay.
Out of all of my siblings, I was homeschooled off and on. I had a rocky relationship with my stepmother. And so, when that got challenging, I was sent to school, and then I would come home for a bit. And then, so I was in and out of school, but yes, I was homeschooled some. And I chose to do the same.
Okay. And fast forward, you met Tom Stearman.
Yep.
Where did you guys meet?
We met initially at his father's church in Oklahoma City. I was 14. He was at the Air Force Academy, and we visited. It was right around Thanksgiving. My parents were looking for a new church, and it's just a very small church with a lot of homeschoolers in it. And it was, so he came home on Thanksgiving break, and of course he was much older than me, and his brother quickly. Once we started talking, his brother quickly pulled him aside and said, "Guy, she's only 14 years old." So, and he was in his 20s. So, but that's when we met initially, and we got to know their family over the years, and we were married later.
Okay. And how many children do you have?
We have 6 children. Yeah. And we are still homeschooling 2 of them. Yeah. The 12-year-old and the 15-year-old, and
yeah. I met some of them, but I don't know if I met all of them yet.
Probably not. Yeah. One lives in Canada.
Right.
So.
I did meet him. And
you've met him? Oh, that's right. He was home for the 4th of July, wasn't he?
July 4th, and they got married the next day, right?
Yeah, and then he left for Canada. So you've probably seen them all because they all come to our annual Independence Day.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's a fabulous thing. And I was telling actually Nehemiah about it, that you guys live on an airstrip. And that's where it was hosted, and they have quite a few families that own airplanes, build airplanes. That's what Tom does. Yeah. Besides being,
he's a professional pilot. But this is his hobby. His love is living with his airplane, and the Stearman family is an airplane family, and so he grew up flying. His father and his grandparents.
So, is there a relationship to the Stearman brand of the airplanes?
Yeah. Okay. Lloyd Stearman was his great uncle.
Oh man!
So his father grew up with a lot of the aviation greats in Wichita, Kansas, where it was the heart of aviation many years ago. So.
I mean, last summer we had Trail Life, our group from church. We went to the airport, and there's a lot of airplanes came, and we actually got to spend some time with some World War II veterans, etc.
Wow.
There was
there
was actually 6 or there were 2 that visited us. One of them was 104. We have some pictures with Sakurai interacting with him. It was great. We had like 6 or 8, I think, Stearmans that came and did formation, and it was amazing.
Yeah, those are beautiful airplanes.
Yes, I love that. Okay, so that you're directly connected to Stearman. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And I always loved talking to you guys and talking to Tom about airplanes. And
yes,
he's almost done with his new plane, right?
He is. He's working on it right now.
Yeah.
About to attach the wings so he can prepare for paint.
Wow.
And we're getting close. It's been many years.
Yeah.
He's been working on it.
I saw it like, 3 years ago?
Yeah, probably looks about the same. But the panel is in, and that's always an exciting step.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, I know you served as a congresswoman, so we're switching gears back to politics a bit. What years did you serve? And I know that the logo was a Stearman plane also.
Yes, right. Yes, I didn't come up with that, but what a great idea. Yeah. Just a friend of a friend actually just threw that together, and we loved it.
Yeah.
But that was March of 2020 March of 2020, everything shut down. April of 2020, I realized that my representative was up for re-election, and I was determined to hold my representatives to the Constitution. And
who was the incumbent at the time? Who was in place already?
His name is Representative Fincher.
Fincher. Okay. Yeah, I'm still getting to know names and places and people. And you heard that one term, and then you took a break now.
Yep,
and
I did, and I was really ready to be finished with politics because it's intense, and you see a lot of evil in people in the political realm, and but I as I said, I do love liberty and I love this country, and it's our responsibility as free citizens to make sure that we hold our elected officials accountable.
I mean, the few times we talked after the term, and I don't remember exactly when we met. I think your term was still on. Okay. It was still running.
It may be
towards the end of that, I think. Yeah, it was in Ramona. In that, and we talked about it. And
yes, I remember. That was it was toward the end.
Chelsea and I came and then talked, and she already knew it for a long time.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah,
it feels.
I think it was like 2.5 years ago, probably. That's when we first met, and we got to talk. Wayne Hill was there, and others were there.
Yeah.
And then in between, we talked about, are you running again for any positions? And you always said no.
No.
Yeah. I know.
I was asked for over a year to do it.
Yeah.
And I said no repeatedly for many reasons, but it's not something I desire to do.
One of the advantages that I have is that I can ask dumb questions.
Okay.
Because I'm not from here. And so
yes.
You were in the Congress. Or
the House.
The House. Sorry, I don't know why I say that all the time.
Well, Congress is the term that they give, at the federal level, but But
we hear it is a representative, the congressional representative, right? Representative. Okay. All right. We'll remove the Congress. So what's the difference, like what in role and representation between a congresswoman to a senator?
Okay. In practice, not much.
Okay.
By design, it should be 2 different roles, but they are continually changing the rules and the responsibilities so that they're becoming more just one big, huge chamber.
Okay.
But ideally, the representative is your closest connection to government. So in 2020, when all of us started waking up and realizing what's going on in our country to some extent, I contacted my representative. That's the first person I went to. So their districts are smaller. They represent fewer people than, say, the senators. They have larger districts because their roles should be different.
Yeah.
And they're smaller so that they are closer to the citizens. And they're reelected every 2 years because if you are unhappy with your representative, there's often a chance for changeover. So every 2 years you can send someone new.
Yeah.
And that's by design. Whereas the senators are supposed to be older. That's, in the Constitution, the senators are 10 years older than the representatives, the
Wow.
minimum age. And their responsibility is more governing the state event, the state processes, the state, at this point, agencies, now that those are there. Whereas the representative is more about the constituent and dealing with constituent issues.
Gotcha.
Which is what I really like to do. I really like to be the representative. That is
so
more in line with my personality.
Yeah. So that position is also open for.
Well, it's up for re-election every 2 years.
2 years.
My representative. Well, and I don't know. You're right on the line, so I'm not sure who your representative is, but.
I mean, we're both in the same county.
Okay. Well, yes, but the county's divided, so the representative lines are different than the Senate districts.
I believe it is Mr.
Probably
Ken.
the same. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't have a challenger, so he won't show up on the ballot. And
why didn't you run against again?
I was asked. Well, I didn't want to run for either position. I was asked to run for the Senate seat.
Okay.
By legislators, constituents, and friends.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why I did it.
The questions that I thought about but never asked.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Why state level instead of federal level?
Because who would want to go up to that swamp?
Toxic swamp. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I homeschool my kids still. The state is manageable. I can do that and still be involved in my kids' lives. Mm-hmm. When I decided to run the first time, my priority was my family. Yeah. So I will do this so long as it does not take away my time with my family. And, there's some time that I give up. But I was still home with my family every night when I was in the house. I'm just close enough that I can drive home every night. And it's nice to be able to just have, just 2 or 3 hours with them in the evenings. And at the federal level, I mean, that's one reason I wouldn't do it to my family. But two, is there hope at the federal level? I don't know that there's hope to do much.
There may not be hope unless we have the state lines and the county levels are straightened out. Right?
Correct.
I mean,
yes. And we do need people who are there. Who are willing to fight the deep state. Yeah. But that's not for me.
Yeah. I mean, I had interest in politics always, but I didn't know I could get involved even to this level with minimal amount of time that I have right now. Sure. Well, hopefully that would be more time.
Major time commitment for sure.
Yeah. And you did ask me to do the precinct, and I did. Yeah. And so I like what you're doing. I like what our friends are doing within our grassroots movement, what we are standing against, and so on. So obviously, we have to talk about a little bit about the person that you're going to run against, right? And in general, there are things that she probably stands for, a number of things, but we are not probably in agreement of those set accomplishments. How do you address?
I'm focused on her voting record. Yeah. So I am running against her voting record only. Yeah. And that is because that ultimately reveals where your alliances are.
Right.
How you actually cast your vote when it comes down to it. A lot of politicians know what to say. They're trained what to say. Mm-hmm. Once they're elected, they are given help and assistance to formulate how to talk to the voters and how to show yourself as a constitutional conservative. Yeah. Because in Oklahoma, that's what people want. Right. So, and I'm not suggesting that with my opponent, but that is what I've seen happen at the state level. I am running against the voting record, and so there are several areas that over the last few years that she has cast a vote that I completely disagree with, or carried legislation that I completely disagree with.
And disagreement comes from the foundational beliefs of, one, the Christian framework, and two, how this nation should be governed.
Yes.
Is there any other category?
When I am looking at legislation, Christianity guides me personally, but when I'm looking at legislation, I'm comparing it to the Constitution. Yes. So you can have things that are permitted by law that are not permitted morally for a Christian. Yeah. or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
There could be things that are restricted by law that I think are perfectly fine
Mm-hmm.
as a believer. So those two things are separate.
Yeah.
As a legislator, I'm looking at the Constitution.
Yeah.
And comparing legislation to the Constitution. But Christianity it guides me in my desire to hold government within its certain bounds.
And our common understanding, and I know there are people who may disagree with this, that the Constitution itself was derived from God's word.
Oh, certainly there was divine intervention there, helping that whole process go through. Absolutely.
Why do you think Christians in the churches don't believe that sometimes? I've came across with several, notably one. I'm leaving the name out because you would know who this person is.
Okay.
Who constantly talks about why the Constitution was not divinely ordained. He's a pastor himself.
Mm-hmm.
What do you respond to someone like that?
Well, I really wouldn't, because it doesn't matter to me what anyone else thinks. I know what I believe, and I act on what I believe. So,
right.
But you can look at the three branches of government and the idea of liberty, and the value of life as represented in the founding documents, not just the Constitution, but the Declaration of Independence and the letters and the articles written during that time. You can understand where a lot of the forefathers are coming from. And I wouldn't say that they're all devout Christians.
Sure.
But I do believe that a lot of what happened was because they were seeking God. Many were seeking God in his direction. And you don't understand the idea of liberty fully and what that means without a relationship with Christ.
Yeah. Amen. I mean, even the staunch atheist Richard Dawkins came out recently saying that he's a cultural Christian because he sees the advantages of a Christian framework in contrast to, say, Islam mainly.
Sure.
And that's what his experience, because he's from London, England, I think. He's at Oxford. And he sees the clear difference. Yet he is still not willing to attribute where the inheritance is from. Not yet. That's the way to do it. Yeah. And so I totally agree with you. When you do the Constitution, which is always understood as federal, I only recently, embarrassingly, only knew that the states have their own constitution. Is that inherited from the federal, or which one came first?
Well, in Oklahoma, obviously the federal government came first, but in the colonies they had their own constitutions. That each state had their own that they were operating under. But the obviously Oklahoma didn't become a state until 1907. So that was many years after the federal government's constitution was ratified. But the Constitution says that every state will operate as a republic, the same way that our federal government does. So all of them are patterned after that, and of course we have different states do it differently. We have the bicameral legislature here, so we have the House and the Senate, and they function a lot like they do at the federal level. Not everyone does that.
Oh, really?
But that's how. Don't ask me for specifics on other states,
Sure.
but I do know there are other states that operate differently.
Wow.
But so Oklahoma's,
meaning there may be some states that missing a Senate, or
right, they operate in they call their legislators different. They function differently. New Hampshire. What I like about New Hampshire is, and I've just met, there are a lot of liberty-minded legislators in New Hampshire, so I've come across them at different meetings, and I like that they only represent a few hundred people, and so they can really get to know their constituents. Now there are a whole bunch of them, a whole bunch of representatives when they all get together, but I like that opportunity that you really have the ability to know everyone that you're representing.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to your records, you are most well known in the country for the most pro-life or anti-abortion or abolition law. Tell me more about that, how that came to be. Was that a central theme of your entire candidacy, anything like that?
Not at all.
Okay,
not at
tell
all.
me more.
I considered myself pro-life when I ran. As a teenager, my grandmother was very active and in in lots of different communities, but she would take me to the abortion clinic in Tulsa. She lived in Broken Arrow.
Okay.
And we would stand out there and talk to women who were coming in for an abortion. That actually was the same abortion clinic that was shut down when my bill passed. So
I stood there with some friends before too, so I know exactly what that one is.
About that. Well,
it's amazing.
So I have no hesitation telling people when I was running that I value life, because I do.
Right.
And I did not understand all the nuances of legislation addressing abortion at the time. And I had no desire to run any legislation addressing it, because we had 50 years of token bills that had been run that did nothing. And I did not want to participate in that.
And every single one of them had some pro-life message but none of them were really intended. So tell me more, like dive on that. Why do they even exist, and why it continues to come back up?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, my opinion, because it's a great campaign line, and that's horrible.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, the abortion issue has really harmed the Republican Party, because we've lost sight of what it means to be a limited government Republican over we will do anything for this emotional issue. Yeah. And abortion is a very emotional issue, and rightfully so. It is life. But we will give up everything. If a candidate just comes and says, I'm pro-life, it doesn't matter what their economic policy is or anything else. They can be a huge growing government candidate so long as they say I'm pro-life. Yeah. And so I think we've lost sight of what our responsibility is as free citizens in a limited government representative republic due to this emotional issue. So while I am pro-life and I will do anything to support life at all stages, I'd never wanted to run legislation. And I was actually, someone had this bill. Texas had, when I was in my second term, the terms are 2 years. So it was my second session. And we're in the House, we were allowed, based on their rules, 8 bills. The Senate has unlimited bills, but each legislator could carry 8. And I had a spot open, and someone asked me if I would carry this bill for him. Texas had passed their heartbeat bill, which had been very effective. And he said, I've written this bill and it's sort of patterned after Texas, and would you carry it? And so I did. I put it in my top 8 and read the language, and it was not good. And I felt like it was going to be another token bill, which I don't want. But then I got in contact with the attorney from Texas who wrote the one for Texas, and visited with him a bit. And he said, yeah, I can rewrite it based on Oklahoma statute. And I said, well, I want it to be written, I want it to start at conception, because the Texas heartbeat bill was heartbeat. And I wanted it written to conception. And he said, yeah, we can do that. So he did. And it, I presented it in committee the first time, which was in February when the House committees meet, and it wasn't even ready. I presented it and I said, listen, this is the bill. This is what I'm planning to do with it. And in a predominantly Republican legislature, no one's going to vote against a pro-life bill. If it actually comes up for a vote, they'll try to kill it before. But once it's on the floor, you're just not very smart to vote against a pro-life bill. So it passed committee. We continued working on it, and it came to the House floor. And as expected, it was debated for 2 hours. It was the first time. Again, I'm an introvert. I don't public speak, and it was my first time to present a bill, and I had to debate it for 2 hours. So, but it passed. Wow. And then, it went through the Senate, and there was, Senator Dom was actually the person who worked with me on it, getting it through. Yeah. But his relationship with the Senate leadership caused it at the very last minute, the day he was supposed to hear it. They said, we're not going to hear it with your name on it. Oh. And so he actually gave it to my current opponent, and she passed it through the Senate. Wow. And then she made amendments. It had to come back through the House, and we had to go through the entire cycle again, debate it on the floor again. and finally passed. And then it was signed a couple weeks later by Governor Stitt, and the next day the clinics in Oklahoma closed. So I don't know all the negotiations that went on between the chambers and between the those that had a vested interest in this. There were like Oklahoma faith leaders. They were involved. Catholic Charities was involved. There was a lot of negotiations. There were many going on surrounding this bill, and so it was not me. I was willing to carry it, but that's as much as I did. I think God pushed this bill through. Amazing. For whatever reason. I mean, to save lives, obviously, but I don't know how. I don't have a lot of reason. I don't know what actually went on. I just know.
Besides divine provision.
Yeah, it did. It was great.
So, and then you saw President Trump come in, and then we have the Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, because of his appointments to the Supreme Court. Yeah, so shortly after, that was just a few weeks after my bill passed, that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And that was a huge step, which it put it back into the states, which is where that issue should have been. It should not be a federal issue. So that was fortunate. And then at the same time that my bill passed, my bill was a civil bill, and so it actually did nothing. The bill itself did nothing. It was never meant to stand alone. At the same time, Senator Dahm passed Senate Bill 612. That was the criminal side, which increased the criminal punishment for performing an abortion. The civil side, it did nothing but give standing in court. So it would still require citizens to take up this cause and address it in court. So they would still have to go, before a judge and have a decision made. My bill just gave them standing, and it said if someone does perform an abortion, a citizen has a right to sue them in court. That's it. Okay. So it did nothing else. So there are actually, even in my bill, there are exceptions for rape and incest, but it's a civil. So it doesn't stop you from suing in the cases of rape and incest. It doesn't give you automatic standing. And there were reasons for that legally. The gentleman in Texas that I worked with said, we can add those because it's a lot. Because if someone were to rape a woman, his family could not then come and sue the doctor involved. So it had very little to do with it had nothing to do with allowing exceptions for rape and incest. It just did not give standing in those cases. So anyone can sue anyone for anything. You can sue someone for performing an abortion. In the case of rape and incest, you don't get automatic standing in those cases. So anyway, and then the criminal side, of course, punished it from the legal enforcement, the DAs, and from the other side, from the law enforcement side. So this was civil, and we had law enforcement, and the two together made Oklahoma the strictest abortion limiting state.
And that's because of the two bills kind of working together in some ways?
Yes.
So why wasn't, I don't understand the part where one is civil. Why was it a civil? What's the difference?
Because
I understand the difference.
The Supreme Court, an attorney wrote it and understood the law a lot more than me. But the point was that on the criminal side, those that are enforcing the law can be predicted. You know what kind of deal you can work with that judge, that attorney, that prosecutor. You don't know what will happen on the civil side because private citizens are unpredictable. And so that's why, and also it went around the previous Supreme Court decisions that shut down every single criminal bill. Okay. This went around them and allowed individuals to sue in court.
Gotcha. Okay.
If that helps.
No, that makes sense. That
I have
helps.
a lot of information on it I can
Yeah.
give you, but that's...
I understand. I don't understand all of it, but I get the glimpse of it.
Sure.
That's awesome. Now, in speaking of some of the positions that your opponent has taken in that very regard, one of the things you say, that she stops human trafficking, illegal immigration, and protect the unborn, and so on and so forth. But it can be vague. I mean, which unborn would be protected? All of them, or some of them?
I can't tell you what she thinks. Is that what you're asking me?
No.
I can tell you what bill she ran and why I...
That's the one I'm asking. Okay. I'm asking voting records. You said, you did made it very clear that you're against voting records.
Yeah.
So
because
speak on
after passing the legislation in Oklahoma that closed the abortion clinics, our senator ran a bill to reduce those restrictions. She actually, her bill would have, it has not passed. If it were to pass, it would add exceptions for rape and incest to our criminal code. So the civil side does not allow abortion in the cases of rape and incest. It just doesn't give you standing. The criminal side, there's nothing that allows those exceptions. So to do that would open up a window for the abortion industry to begin offering abortions in the cases. It was actually rape, incest, and sexual assault. Okay. And so depending on what is defined as sexual assault, and we know that language is manipulated to get desired results, it could open up a very large window.
So her bill was a modifier to the criminal side of things.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, would it actually alter Senator Dam's bill, or this would just bring a new thing?
Her bill would alter a lot of abortion language. It touched on his bill, on my bill, which were statute. So it would go and alter a lot of things, and a lot of what was in it was good. There is necessary cleanup that needs to be done in our statute.
Sure.
And so a lot of that was good.
Yeah.
But I mean, when I vote on a bill, if there is any negative, I'm going to vote no. And that is a strong negative. I mean, it's a strong enough negative that I'm willing to go out and knock doors for nearly a year.
Right.
So that was one of the big ones.
Yeah.
To introduce that bill. And, it was lobbied, as disappointing as it is, it was lobbied at the Capitol by pro-life, a well-known pro-life group in Oklahoma to reduce the restrictions on abortion. And they were saying, well, if we don't do that, the Democrats are going to pass a constitutional change to give every woman a right to an abortion in our Constitution. And, well, we don't act in fear. If that were to happen, we fight that. But we don't bow down and let them have this...
based on our assumptions.
Yes.
I mean, even if theirs passed, that doesn't mean that Democrats won't do anything else.
Right.
Well, I mean, yeah.
I know.
Not a good argument, but...
yes, that was my thought.
So what other significant voting records would you be against? Or let's say taxes, indoctrination of children, education, Second Amendment, which just happened, something to that specifically. So what other voting records?
Those are big items. There are certain bills that affected my decision.
Okay.
Education was one a little bit. I don't always disagree with what the general legislature is doing on education.
Yeah.
I know that Ryan Walters is working very hard to limit the indoctrination of children. Yeah. And I know there are a lot of legislators, the conservative legislators, who support that. So I'm not always in opposition to that side of it. One bill that was probably the straw, that got me involved was lobbied actually while I was there, and it was lobbied more than any bill that I experienced.
Okay.
I had Democrats sitting in my office for long periods of time lobbying this bill, and Democrats didn't normally talk to me because they knew my voting record. So, and that was to allow driver's license to be issued
Yeah.
to the illegal aliens coming across the border and into Oklahoma. And of course, any legitimizing the illegals is something that I will always oppose.
Yeah.
And that actually went to the Senate floor and was voted on by the Senate. It never made it to the House. And our senator voted for that.
Yeah.
And so this is not a case. Sometimes they push legislation through very quickly with just a moment's notice, and you don't have time to read it, or you've gotten bad information. There was more information on that bill than just about any bill that I've seen. And so we voted on that bill, or well, the legislature, the House didn't, but the legislature voted on that bill and determined their positions with lots of information.
Yeah.
So that's a very big one, because that shows in my opinion, a tendency toward, ultimately election. It's going to cause elections to come be a little bit more questionable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things, if you ask them, when I say Democrats, of any level, the citizens in politics or whatever, they will never agree. That's the reason why they want.
I understand.
Right.
You're never told the truth in
correct.
politics.
Correct. What is their reason that they actually speak of?
Oh, what do they say is the reason?
Yeah.
Because we want them to pay their fair share. We want to know who's here. When they're pulled over by officers on the road, we want to know who they are.
Yeah.
Well, if they don't have a legal license, then we have a pretty good idea who they are, don't we?
Right.
Yeah.
Understood. What is let's just say Wendi Stearman is the next president, for example.
No, not going to happen. I would never
what
be
would
elected.
you do about this illegal immigration issue besides, closing the border, but deportation? What are the number of things that you would do, and what you wish to see the states do?
Well, I think Texas is doing a pretty good job
Yes.
of standing up for the rights that they have as a state, the powers that they have. And I would close the border. I mean, I would close the border completely at this point, until we get it under control.
When you close the border, means everywhere, not just the southern border.
Well, yes. Let us close off the United States and start removing those who do not belong.
Right.
I mean, but that's easy to say. That would be a big fight.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not going to be president, so I'm not going to face that fight.
Some say, even in our camp, very few, maybe one, we are supposed to be compassionate towards the people who are coming in. We are supposed to, and the scripture uses the word, treating the foreigner and so on. Well, my position always been, the scripture actually says and labels them as foreigner and not as citizen. What do you think of that type of argument when people say we're supposed to be compassionate, which basically means asylum blank,
well, I think
blank check
the
asylum? The
Bible is written to individuals, not a group of people.
Yeah.
So it is written to me.
Yeah.
I will be compassionate. If I were to, that is a very personal direction. You cannot be compassionate as a government, because a government shows compassion by first stealing the money from its people. So if we're talking about biblical principle, let us not steal from people.
Right.
So that kind of dismisses the rest of the argument.
Yeah.
A government cannot be compassionate.
Yeah. Because it's taxation as theft first before giving it to someone else. So switching a little bit, but still on the finance side of things, the political funding, right? So I want to switch there. You expressed concerns about the influence of lobbyist money in politics, emphasizing your commitment to refuse such funding. How do you think this stance differentiates you from other candidates?
Most of the legislature.
All of them.
Yeah, with the exception of about 4.
Yeah.
They all take a lot of lobbyist money, and they say
exception of 4 that is so shockingly low.
Yeah. Now there are more people realizing that they can campaign, that there are ways to do it without taking money. So across the state, there are several candidates who are running with no lobbyist money, no PAC money. They're making the same commitment.
Yeah.
And they're just working. And so I think the most disturbing thing that I saw while I was in the House was the use of lobbyist money and consultants influencing the legislators. And it was so disturbing to me at the time. Even before I decided to run again and to make this commitment, I was telling everyone, we don't have a voice there because the lobbyists are there all the time. They're
Right.
the ones building the relationships. They, according to ethics rules, PACs can give a lot more money than an individual can give. And so we're not even allowed to give a candidate as much money as a PAC can give them. So who do you think they're going to listen to? The
Right.
person who's allowed to give them $3,000, the person who's allowed to give them, or the PAC that's allowed to give them $5 or more, or those that are, even have their money hidden through the dark money
Sure.
realm.
Yeah. So you have the lobbyists and you have consultants.
Mm-hmm.
The consultants are hired directly by the politicians,
Mm-hmm.
and the consultants then work with lobbyists to see
Mm-hmm.
which one gets piped through.
And consultants have their own PACs.
Ah.
And yes, so
That's how they make
it's a
their
great
money.
system that they've got going up there. But I was not, so the lobbyists stopped visiting my office pretty quickly.
If they say something to this nature, you guys are all capitalists, and why are you against this idea? How would you respond? If it is all amounts to capitalism style of finance management and making money,
well,
how would you respond to somebody
true
like
capitalism, the free market wouldn't have restrictions. So I would be more supportive
that? Okay.
of a total free market, but there are limits that there are regulations that limit the individual. Just like I mentioned, just in how much you are allowed to give a candidate. I would prefer there be no limits on that at all, because the big money, they know how to operate through without reporting.
Right.
So they're going to do it. We are only limiting the people by these regulations. So we're only limiting really the people who want to follow the law,
right?
Which is the nature of most law. You limit the good people, and the criminals don't care that there's a law because they're already willing to. Not that everyone's a criminal involved, but there are ways around the law.
Same argument as the gun control.
It isn't capitalism.
Sure.
It is heavily regulated. It's not the free market.
Right. And so, as a candidate for the Oklahoma Senate, what are your top priorities going in? Let's just say, what are you going to tackle the first 90 days or whatever that your measure is? I think the president, they always go by the first 100 days. Is there anything like that for senators?
Oh, not maybe. I mean, I think some may make commitments to their constituents, with the, what I have, my commitment to people is, one, I'm not going to be listening to the lobbyists. I encourage everyone, call me, I give people my direct contact info. That's my number one commitment is I am there for the people that in the district. And the one way that you can represent all people is through taxation. That is the biggest burden, in government, is the taxation. So certainly any way to reduce that burden on the people. And, I like the idea of a no income tax system in Oklahoma. When I'm visiting with people at the door, not everyone agrees because they've seen what has happened in Texas. And the property tax in Texas. So I think that in order to get the full support of everyone, it would be necessary to first cut a lot of the administrative costs in government and allow people to see, listen, I personally am not looking to replace the income tax with another source of funding.
Right.
I want to cut the income tax, cut the spending at the state level, so that the people can keep their money. And ultimately, I think that does boost the economy. And so it's not a direct, they like to always run a fiscal impact report on legislation that has any financial bearing. And so they're going to say, well, if we cut this much of the income tax, they just immediately remove that from the income to the state. So they, what that number is, which I believe is, what did they say? I forget how much it was, but you remove the income tax from the calculations. But I think that you will then have receipts in other areas, sales tax and such.
I know Governor Kevin Stitt has been kind of working on that. Are you in support of what he's doing?
I support what he says about that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
All right. Sounds good. A vision for Oklahoma's future. You've described the Capitol as a battlefield rather than a social club. What are the biggest challenges you see facing Oklahoma today?
Well, always taxation and regulation are the big things that affect Oklahomans. Self-employment, small businesses. Those types of things are very regulated. So the economic side is really my biggest concern.
So you think about the whole pot industry, for example, and all the land that's been bought, the water issues, and then the foreign governments or foreign individuals buying up land and things of that nature. Is that on your radar as well?
Yes, I think that the foreign governments coming in is a federal government responsibility, and it's really challenging to deal with at the state level because you have farmers who are offered cash that is a lot more than what their land is worth. And how do you tell a private farmer, a citizen, no, you can't take that money? Now, I know there are some citizens who refuse to take money from foreigners, and that is wonderful because they're doing it on their own.
How are the foreigners allowed to buy land of that nature? Like, where I come from, I don't think that's even possible. Like, if I'm being an American citizen, if I have to go back, yes, we do have some inheritance. I can manage, I can sell it. But when it comes to agricultural land like this, I am not allowed near it.
Yeah. And that's what they're trying to do in Oklahoma, is to restrict that. But there are also Americans who are purchasing on behalf of the foreigners. Yes. So that one is trickier, and I know they're constantly working at the state level to address that.
Okay. Well, before I ask the last question and a bunch of those, I do want to recognize that Nehemiah is producing today, and we also have Mike Hitchcock also in the back. And I was going to ask you in a minute, so we have time, to see if you have any questions for Wendy.
Okay.
So think of that, and then we'll come back to that in a minute. You have previously also critiqued the level of services provided to low-income families in Oklahoma, suggesting the state offers too many services. Could you discuss the reach role of the government from your standpoint or state level constitution standpoint? Where should we be in all things?
Well, the founders of our country, those that wrote the Constitution, believed that there was not the ability in our Constitution to take from one man to help another man. And that was rejected for quite some time when the Constitution was first ratified. And I still believe that is the case. I believe that government, in order for government to show that benevolence to the person who is in need, they have to steal. It's the same as we mentioned before. They have to first steal from someone. So I don't think that there is any situation in which that's justified. But it's done in practice all the time.
In essence, if it was your wish completely to go after, there would not be any social services provided by the government.
Oh, correct.
Okay.
Yes. No.
It has to be by the community, families, churches' responsibility.
It's easier to do it with government money because it's there,
right?
And it's guaranteed to always be there.
Yeah.
And so that is certainly the easier way to do it. But when you do that, you remove the ability for private entities, for churches, for families to step in and do it, because there's no need, because the government has stepped in. And so churches get accused and private citizens of not helping enough, but in fact, the government stepping in reduces their ability, and then they regulate that. They regulate the process so heavily that it's difficult for individuals to do.
Yeah, agencies, frameworks, employees, contractors. It's a big mess after.
Yeah, the government getting involved in the economy at all is it just keeps causing problems. And there's actually, that's one of the other reasons that I am so interested in challenging our senator is there has been, just in the last couple of years, an increase in government involvement in developing our economy in this state. Rather than leaving it to the free market, they are taking the reins. They are negotiating with companies, often with companies who have values that are in contrast to what we have, the Oklahomans have. So a lot of the companies who support the ESGs, the scoring system, the DEI training in their companies, and they openly advertise this. And yet our legislature and the executive branch have been negotiating with these companies to give them incentives, which is, our money to set up shop here, rather than just offering a free place. So many people have moved here since 2020 because of freedom. Yeah. Because of the reduced government regulation here in the event of the shutdown, which we weren't completely free of all of it, but better than, say, California. Right. So what we're seeing in this state is just bill after numerous bills that are developing a program for offering our money to corporations for them to come here.
Yeah, so, I saw some of those things with a number of people that we know who's working on making that possible, offering to, companies, whether they're even local, they're probably coming from different states, or even foreign individuals coming, setting shop here, and then they're getting government funding with probably no accountability in terms of their responsibilities as far as hiring. What's the positive that there's been? Is that just labor and market and employment?
How are they selling the idea? Yeah. They're saying it's for labor, but in the areas, I was directly involved with the first one while I was in, and it was called Project Ocean, and it was out in Mays County. Okay. And they were working with Panasonic and trying to bring Panasonic here, and which is an international company. Yeah. And they said it's for jobs. It'll bring these jobs. Well, the people in Mays County said, well, we have hundreds of jobs in this industrial park where you're trying to set it up that are not filled already. We're not in need of jobs. Yeah. So it's not, what they're saying is not necessarily everything that's going on.
In Oklahoma, you'll be hard-pressed to find larger populations to fill those roles besides Tulsa and Oklahoma City.
And they'll even say now that it's not to provide jobs to Oklahomans necessarily. Okay. It's to bring more people in. And Governor Stitt always says, well, we want more taxpayers. Right. But at what expense to the people to bring them here? And what does that do to the population of Oklahoma and the values that people hold, that they share in Oklahoma?
Yeah, I think last year, I think we had like over 200,000 people come in.
Really? I didn't know that number.
Yeah, I have an Excel sheet that tracks that, and so I probably will send it to you and take a look.
Well, there's a bill, the most concerning bill that I've seen this session, and actually since I've been aware of state politics, is in the legislature right now. Yeah. It is called the Compete Act, and it is one that is actually going to take all of these negotiations out of the legislature, which tends to slow things down because there are 150 people, and put it into an appointed committee of 9 people, 3 appointed by Senate leadership, 3 appointed by House leadership, and 3 appointed by the executive branch, the governor. And it says in the bill, which will become law should it be passed, that these people will be under non-disclosures. So they will be negotiating with your money. Now, they will trigger an inspection of what they're doing if a plan offers more than $75 million to one company in 1 year. If that gives you any idea at the magnitude of this bill. Wow. And it will be there. It is actually written down that they'll be under non-disclosures. So they they will not be able to discuss with those that they represent what they are doing with our money.
Wow. What do you plan to do with it? What do you plan to do to change?
Bill, well, I would certainly vote no, unlike our senator.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I mean, when Panasonic was going through, I certainly did all that I could to slow and to stop that. And it, thankfully, Panasonic did not set up here. They went to Kansas. But what I would do is question all that I can and shed light on what is actually going on, which is what we need. We need people who will tell us what is actually going on at the Capitol.
Yeah, gotcha. All right. Well, I'm going to turn to Mike for a second here.
Sure.
Mike, do you have any questions for Wendy?
Well, first I want to say thank you for coming out. I actually both of you. You, Gijo, covered a lot of things that were on my mind. Okay. A lot of questions that I had, or just some things that, I wanted, clarified. So thank you. Because of that, I actually have two off-the-cuff questions that I've been thinking about. One professional and one private, if you don't mind. Okay. So the first question about your professional career, or I shouldn't say career because it's not really career, but in the realm of politics, what have you learned, lessons learned, that kind of took you by surprise, the first couple years in politics, and what would you do differently now going forward to be more effective?
Well, I did not understand the significance of the authority that our legislators hold as far as in their involvement in state government and state agencies. I understand that more now. I did start understanding it. There's no training. There's nothing that comes. You're elected, and 2 weeks later you're supposed to be submitting bills. 2 months later you're on the floor. So and there are so many agencies in the state to become familiar with. I still don't know what they all are. No one does. I asked many times, and so learning that as a representative, they actually do have authority to call the agency heads on the carpet and demand answers. And so I did learn that. And so I would use that more, understanding the authority and the responsibility of the office. I went in just because everything was shut down and we are losing our freedom and no one was stepping up to defend that freedom. That's why I went in. And so I have learned a lot about the process of government and what a single person could do to shed light on what's going on in the state agencies, which the state agencies are the ones essentially making the law in Oklahoma. It should be the legislature, but the legislature gives that responsibility over to the state agencies. So that's one. The other one that I've told a lot of people who are considering running is just, again, I'm a homeschool mom. I've lived a fairly quiet life. And what I found interesting in the halls of the Capitol is that everyone is watching, any interaction that you have, they are working an angle. Everyone is, it doesn't matter what you say. They are formulating how they can
manipulate,
sure.
Yeah.
So that was something I had to wrap my mind around, because I was accustomed to just having a conversation with a person, not realizing that there's actually politicking going on just in a conversation about, your kids at home or anything that you're talking about. People are looking for an angle that they can use.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So on the personal side, and I've asked this question, and some people have a hard time answering this, but I think it says a lot about you as a person and kind of what's your focus in life, because it really, I think if you have a long-term focus, something that you live by, it really drives who you are and what decisions you make. So the question is, when you take your last breath, what do you want your children to say about you?
that I loved liberty, because for me, that is Jesus. Liberty is the greatest expression of God's love, and Jesus was sent here to give us that liberty. And so that's how I would like to be remembered.
Very good. Okay.
Wonderful. Well,
Right.
we can wrap that up here.
Okay.
That's perfect ending. Is there anything else you want to add still? Anything that I did not ask that I wish that you wish that I had asked? Anything?
No, I appreciate the honor of the invitation.
You're always welcome here. And I love the fact that you said that it's because of you that you're coming here, that you're not doing this.
Yes. Well, it's not something I desire to do, but I do appreciate the invitation.
And so we don't take that lightly. So it's a privilege to sit down and talk with you. And hopefully that we can have more of this conversation with others as as our grassroots grow.
Yeah.
And found their own biblical principles and continue to take over the things that we need to submit to the Lord. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, and thanks for your time.
All right.